Look around. Everywhere these days, people are crying out for effective leadership. There's no mistaking it any longer. Men, especially leaders, are struggling, emasculated by imposed rules, stereotyping, and leadership models that are no longer working. There are many women who are doing a much better job at leadership than the men, and we need to recognize them. We need their help too. Welcome to W.E.L.L., the Women's Expressions on Leadership, Learning, and Liberty podcast show, and I'm its host, John Krotek. This is the show where women can help us men to be better men, more effective leaders. My guest for this episode is very, very busy, and she is a good friend, Anette Whittenberger, and I met about 2.5, 3 years ago, and I was on her podcast. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but I'm super excited to have her here on this pilot series of the W.E.L.L. podcast. She's been a military spouse for 24 plus years. She's a mother to a daughter and to a son. We can talk a little bit about that today, leadership in the home. And she's also a retired combat veteran. We have something in common. We're both in the NBC. And for those that don't know, that's the Nuclear Biological Chemical Corps. Interesting stuff we learned there. She did that for 17 years and 4 months and served her country proudly and honorably. It's a brain injury thing. And then just thrilled to have served in the same army that Annette did. She retired in November 2016, and she admits it by all accounts that she's an accidental entrepreneur. We can talk a little bit about that. It still takes leadership, right? And she uses her voice now to share her story like she will today. But she talks about her life after the army, living with mental illness. We do have more than one thing in common, and how she was able to overcome the challenges of that, the transition and the mental, right? She's also focused on her own business, and she does a podcast show. I was on her show year before last. She's a very polished speaker. She mentors veterans and non-veterans, and she's a huge volunteer. Her first book, The Wall Between Two Lives, is an incredible account of her story and the things that she was challenged with. And we're going to talk about that today, too. We're going to talk about so many things. Her blog is called A Wild Ride Called Life. And it is wild. It has been. She incorporates stories from her post-military life, and she shares her life as a mom and has a military spouse, living with post-traumatic stress, anxiety, and depression, lifelong illnesses that quite a few people have to overcome. And it takes real leadership and grit and determination to get over those things. Along with the writing, and we talked about the podcast titled The Truths We Hide. And my journey with Annette, an interview there, she's an amazing questioner or interviewer. She's able to extract things that people do hide. And there's things about all of us that we keep hidden deep inside. And my whole journey with that podcast and Annette was she was able to elicit things out of me that was almost healing. So I would call it not only a storytelling podcast, but it's a healing platform for anybody that she interviews. It's pretty cool because she provides hope and allows us to share our stories that are tough to hear sometimes, but that we need to tell. And then her volunteering. Oh my gosh, we talk about being busy. She loves to volunteer and assist and mentor veterans. She is a mentor for Veterati. Many of you know what that is. She mentors other military spouses because of her over 2 decades doing it on eMentor and Amplify. And she's also volunteering for the NASDAQ Mentor Circle Makers Group. We can talk a little bit about that, more leadership stuff. So I know I'm getting long-winded, just a few more things to say about Annette, and then we're going to let her tell her story. She's also been a mentor for TAPS, the Tragedy Assistance Program for children survivors of those who are killed in combat. And she's also a member of the Association for Military Spouse Entrepreneurs and Women's Veterans Network. She continues her work as a mentor, a consultant, a public speaker, an author, a podcaster, and sharing resources from nonprofits who are like-minded and like-hearted when it comes to mental health. And I just heard less than a couple of minutes ago that she's got another project coming up soon. We'll let her tell you about that, but it has something to do with the universal language of music. So without any further ado, I apologize for being so long-winded, but we got a very busy leader here and an important story to tell. Thank you, Anette Whittenberger, for being here today.
Oh my gosh, John, thank you so much. It's so hard to imagine the things that you do until somebody reads it and you're like, oh my God, I do all those things.
No, you're right about that. It is. And you know what? Which raises a good point. Too many of us don't give ourselves credit,
Yeah.
and where credit is due. And when you're a giving person like yourself, I can relate to that. It's tough for us to put ourselves up on a marquee and say, hey, look at me, I'm Anette Whittenberger. We just don't do that.
No.
So, but no, that's really her, and that's really you, and all the things that we just said is your story to date. So you're a leader, you're a mentor, which is all about learning and education, and you certainly believe in liberty and freedom, not only freedom of the mind, but freedom for people around the world, including the United States of America. So, tell me, you inspired me, and I just had some green tea, so with the caffeine in it.
Oh no.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your household growing up and how you developed all these amazing skill sets that you exemplify today. Tell us about the household.
Mm. So my parents actually divorced when I was 6 years old. And my father was in our lives sporadically, not consistently. And so that was difficult growing up. We did the one weekend thing or every other weekend thing for a few years. And then he had his own family. And unfortunately, we were kind of, pushed to the side a little bit. But we just continued to live. My mom actually bought a house about, on the other side of town. So we were 10, 15 minutes away from our father. And she just was, she was just really amazing. And it's sad that it took me this long to realize that, because she was going to school. She was trying to earn her bachelor's degree and raise the two of us. And then she got remarried. And then, she just really tried. We were independent from such a young age, being latchkey kids and trying to take care of ourselves, because she was trying to do her thing. And so I saw that, and she always taught us to be independent, never rely on anybody else for financial freedom. So that was always instilled in our mind. How can we support ourselves without having to rely on someone else to support us? So my brother and I, that's how we've been all our lives, is just independent and not really wanting to rely on anybody else. I grew up with that in my mind, which kind of hindered me in relationships though, because in my mind, nobody could tell me what to do and I could do it myself. So
yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah.
So that was a little difficult growing up, trying to figure that part out, how to let people in. So that was.
Well, thanks for sharing that. So early on, so you raise a good point here. Early on, with your dad, who's probably, as a child, one of the most important male figures in our lives, and the head of the household, it had to solidify something. That's not the best example for a young girl to get when dad leaves the family. And if you want to share, how did that affect you as far as your image of men? Did it put a visual in your mind or a belief besides being independent?
Yeah. So unfortunately, when I was 9.5, almost 10, I was sexually abused, and I was abused by it was my best friend's father then. And it happened twice. And, I can't say why I didn't, I can't answer why I didn't say anything the first time, except for the fact that I was scared. And so the second time that it happened is when I was like, oh my gosh, this is what is going on. So that left a huge, just hole in my heart for most of my life, because after that, I grew up dating the wrong kind of men. I mean, guys were verbally abusive and some were physically abusive. And I tried so hard to just gain acceptance. I wanted them to like me. I don't know how that all, it was just all those little things from the age of 6 up until 10. And then further on, it was just so strange for me to think about those as I try to dig deeper into my life, because I really did. I tried so hard to hold on to men. I didn't want them to leave. And so that really affected my relationships. Um, you know, all my life, really.
Yeah, that's tough. And, and as somebody, as the male brother to you, I wasn't assaulted by a parent, but it was by a much larger child, boy. And, I can relate to many of those same feelings of acceptance and approval from others and hanging on at all costs, despite the negative effect that it has on our own personal psyche. I mean, I hid it for 42 years. I never mentioned anything to anybody, but I can tell you, and this, that had a significant impact on a lot of my relationships from then on, how I perceived myself and girls and later on women. But so you have these negative things happening, but you become a poster child for resilience. It's obvious, when I look at your biography and I know what you're up to these days. So that, thanks for sharing that. That's tough, but it's also, it's healing too. And for other people to hear that you can be confronted with some of the greatest challenges of your life, whether you're a boy or a girl, and you can still overcome. So kudos to you. So here we are, you have those things happen to you, you go on. Did you join the military right away?
No, I attended an all-girl Catholic high school, and I had a friend who enlisted in the army, and for us back then, that was like, wow, that is so cool. And so I attempted to. I had a recruiter at the house. I was about to sign the paper, but I got scared, and so I chose not to enlist at 18. And I attended community college, and then I went on to a university that had the ROTC program, the Reserve Officer Training Corps. And I was determined when I chose that university, they had to have that, because I still wanted to somehow figure out how to take a chance on the Army. So when I went to Arizona State University, I did the program for a few years, and they said, okay, it's time, you need to make a decision. I was like, okay, let's just do it. Let's just try it out. But backstory with that, my father didn't really believe that women should serve. And so, like I said before, stubborn and can't tell me what to do, I did it to prove a point to myself and my family, because all of them were like, why are you joining the Army? Why, you just, they had no idea. They couldn't understand why I would do that. And I just, I thought I was only going to serve a few years, but I met my husband my senior year of college, and he was already commissioned as an officer. And I basically followed him around. We were stationed everywhere. And every year that he was in, I stayed another year in. And so I was that person who couldn't see my future. I was like, I'll just stay another year. And so that's how it happened. It's such a crazy story, but that's how I ended up serving for so long.
So what was it like being a female officer and basically, an army full of male leaders? What was that like?
So my first encounter, in my ROTC program, there were a few of us females. So that already was like, wow, I looked up to them because I thought it was so amazing. They knew what they wanted, and I was kind of here floating around. But I was given an opportunity to train with an airborne unit in Italy, and while I was still attending the school. And so I went, but unfortunately, I entrusted another soldier because I had no idea. I was so naive and so gullible, even at the age of 22. He, wanted to show me around Italy before we went to Germany for training. And so I went with him, but he took advantage of that situation. And I was completely traumatized because I couldn't imagine, I couldn't believe that someone would do that. I was training with them, and I was the only female in this airborne unit. And I don't know, I just couldn't believe it. So I asked to leave early. I said, I can't stay here. I need to go back. And so my sponsor that I was shadowing, he sent me back because he knew what had happened, and I didn't proceed to do anything. I was just too scared. As I went back through Germany to come back to the States, I found out I had a leader that was there that I knew from school, and he was a good senior non-commissioned officer, so I trusted him, and I went to tell him what had happened, and same thing happened with him. And so from then on, I think I just kind of figured out I need to be stronger. I need to figure out how to survive this if this is how they're
Mm.
going to be. So throughout my career, I was just always like leery of being around male soldiers because I didn't want to go through that again.
That's tough, because trust is so valuable between people in general, but even when you get into an organization where leadership is integral to the success of the mission wherever you go. And it kind of just blows me away. I've talked to other ladies that have been in the service that have had similar situations, and what a mind blowing, and that's putting it real mild, and that a mind blowing thing to have happen, especially when you're trying to give your all for the organization you're in. And that, we know that things like that also happen in the private sector as well. So obviously, a horrible thing for leadership is for people to take advantage of a position and hurt other people. I mean, you forfeit your leadership position when you do that. That's my personal opinion, but it's got to be real. So, but you stayed in 17 years. Were you married at that time, or?
I was engaged. No, we were still dating. I didn't get engaged until later, so I wasn't married yet.
Yeah.
But
But you
again,
kept it all inside. You didn't really talk to anybody.
no, because who was going to believe me? It was one of our leaders. I did come back and I tried to confide in somebody, but I didn't go through with the full process because he was well known. So who's gonna believe me?
And that's
So
just taking advantage of a certain situation. But you came back, you got
I came back.
engaged. At least you had something good going. You had a
I
guy
know.
who believed in you, who wasn't going to abuse you.
Right.
Yeah. So almost like a dichotomy. So tell us a little bit about that then. Being married as a mom in the service, and then you had your two children. So you had a blessing out of it.
I did. I had to learn how to be a mom, a soldier, and a spouse all at the same time at the age of 25. So I went to Germany. I left home. I left the country for the first time on my own, and so I was in Germany, pregnant, trying to figure out my life, and it was so eye opening. It's like, oh my gosh, how do I do this? But when people ask me, how did you? I don't know. We just did, because you couldn't tell the army, I can't go to work. I have a kid. You have to figure out daycare. You have to figure out how you're going to make it work. And so that's what I had to do. And I was very, very fortunate to find two amazing ladies who took care of my kids while I was at work or in the field or whatever. I was so lucky. And that doesn't always happen. And that's how I survived the first 3 years in Germany. Everywhere else, it was just, I don't know how we did dual military life. It was just very challenging. And there were points where I was resentful because I felt like I was doing it all and he wasn't. Like, why is he more important than me? So it was very hard because I had to get out of that mindset. We're both serving, but usually the moms do it. So I just did it.
And that's much admiration. My mom was not in the service, but I was born in Germany. So my sister was born there, and my dad was an Army officer. So I'm like, gosh, that was my mom. She was over there raising kids, and my dad was out doing the Army thing. But that's what a lot of people don't understand. And men, we have to admit it, that there's motherhood is huge, and all children need safety, and they need comfort, and they need protection. And who better than to give it the mother? And so kudos to you, sharing with with us those tough things, but also the realities of life of a female officer in the United States Army. So all the ladies who are listening, or the mothers out there who are raising children in the service, God bless you. And then to the men who are married to these ladies, God bless you guys too. But, make sure you support those women. I mean, we don't have to be dragging our knuckles all the time. So tell us about the deployments. What was that like? With the children older then, or how did that work?
So my first deployment, actually my husband and I both deployed at the same time, about 6 months apart. I went first and then he did. Our children were 3 and 5. And at that time we didn't know he was going to deploy. That wasn't supposed to happen, but we found out, and my mom actually moved from California to Texas to help raise the kids with his dad. His dad had come in from Colorado. So just a crazy, unexpected thing. I went to Iraq, and it's very hard. And I know, to change your mindset, you have to leave the things back at home. It's like you have to reprioritize. You have to figure out what can I focus on right now, and you have to focus on your soldiers. And so that's what I did. And back then we had video teleconferences, VTCs, and you had to have them scheduled. So it's not like you could go see your family on video all the time. They had to be scheduled at a certain time. And, that was hard to see the kids through video. My mom trying to figure out things and asking me questions I didn't have answers to is very difficult. And, I don't know how we did that either. I'm so thankful that we had our parents to be able to help that. Not everybody has that. And so that first deployment was hard.
It sounds to me that you may not know it or may admit it, or maybe you do, that you have some kind of subconscious optimism at play. Because what I see with you so far in the short time we've been talking is that no matter what happened or what you were going through, you made it. And it had to have been something subconscious in that, in the back of your mind somewhere, that you knew you were going to make it. And, that's where, when you were talking about independence and what your mom taught you growing up, I think that what your mom instilled in you at a young age was the ability to know or realize that you were going to get through no matter what it was.
Wow.
I get that sense. Well, I get that sense, and so you probably are more of an optimist than you give yourself credit for.
I think
guess
you're right.
No, I'm serious. I'm
Yeah.
trying to listen to you and hear the story. Well, how would she do that? Well, I get it. You need to put that on your bio. You are an eternal optimist.
Wow.
Yeah.
I never thought of it that way.
It's just another slice of the pie. So how many deployments did you do while you were in the service?
I did 2. The next one was to Afghanistan.
Afghanistan, right? And then, was it kind of the same thing, or you were more prepared then?
So
and they were older too.
They were older, and that was actually by accident, because I was slated for rear detachment, and I just felt like I wanted to do more, and I asked to be deployed, and that did not go over very well with the family. And my brigade commander at the time, he created a slot for me. So I went twice to Afghanistan in their year deployment. I went there for a couple months. I came back and I went back again. And that was the more difficult one. My kids were older, but we lost a lot of soldiers there, and I never experienced that being forward. And I think that one really hit me hard, because I was also trained as a casualty assistance officer and a casualty notification officer. Mm-hmm. So I did those as well while I was in the rear detachment. So I knew how that went, and that really, really got me. I didn't know how to show those emotions, because when we lost somebody, everybody went their separate ways, and I was just like, what do we do? I don't know how to process this. Like, what happens next? And it was very difficult.
Was that a year deployment? Afghanistan?
I only went for a total of 4 months, but for them, it was a year.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Well, thank God you made it back. You know, the
Yes.
combat and conflict, or it's a whole different world, which is another understatement. But, you know, again, you survived, you came back out of it. And, you know, do you think that molded you in any way? Did it change your value sets as far as leadership went, or, you know, the way you were thinking about things?
I think it really messed me up, because, when you come back and they ask you if you're okay, if you want to see anybody, we always check the box. Yeah, I'm fine. I don't need to see anybody. But really, I held on to that for so long that, I still get emotional thinking about it, because it was, um, one of our soldiers, she lost her husband there, and she was notified there, so we were
Mm.
all together. And so that still breaks my heart, because I see her on social media, and it's like, I don't know how she does it. I don't know how she continues, but she does. She has kids now and everything, so it's just a reminder. And every year, how we do on social media, every year, we on the anniversary, we um pray for those that we lost. So that's always a reminder. So it still stings for all of us. It's
You
really
know,
it's really hard.
well, thanks for sharing that. You know, that does bring up um, a good conversation. We don't have to expound on it too much, but, you know, I've heard it often said, you know, grief fatigue, you know, and when you're in the military, unlike civilian life, you know, you are surrounded at times as combat soldiers and veterans, you are surrounded by the specter of grief and death and those kinds of things. And when you're mentoring people, which I know you have a huge heart, sometimes it does reinforce that. You know, I had a Gold Star father tell me one time, you know, John, the triggers, the feelings don't get any better. He says to me, they just get different, you know, because as we heal ourselves, we learn better ways to cope. But at the same time, the triggers don't go away. You know, I was trying to explain the trigger of a sexual assault as a child. And I just learned this the other day, a woman that had been through some serious stuff like you and me. But she said, you know, I finally realized that as a child, you want security and safety. And when something like that happens to you, you don't have that. So you're constantly searching for security and safety, you know,
Mm.
approval and acceptance from the relationships. And when we don't get it, we get resentful, we get angry. And think about this, and I'm sure you have sexual assault. I don't even like to say victim, but sexual assault recipients, we get triggered daily. Sometimes we don't even really know it.
Mhm.
You know, trauma for children is different. I think trauma is trauma, but I think it's a little bit different when you're stunned with it at such an early age. And so I'm thinking Annette, leader. I'm thinking independence. I'm thinking optimism in the face of all odds. I'm thinking dedication because you're a mother, and love of country. And I'm thinking, again, like we said earlier, resilience. So 17 years, 4 months, you ETS, which means you ended your service. Tell us what that was like.
I didn't plan on retiring at 17 years, 4 months. I actually didn't. I wasn't selected for the next rank for promotion, and so I was devastated. Absolutely devastated, and it
Mm.
crushed my whole soul. And I didn't know how to process that, because then, they gave you the option to retire or continue service in the National Guard or in the reserves. And I had about 30 days to make that decision. So I did my research, because I really wanted to continue to serve. But I spoke to another recruiter, and he said, you know what, ma'am, it just makes more sense for you to just retire. And I was shattered. And so I had 6 months to exit, and
Mm.
6 months is not enough time to to collect yourself and figure out what the heck you're going to do, especially when you had somewhat of a plan. So I retaliated. I lashed out. I was angry. I didn't attend my retirement ceremony. I isolated myself. I sat in the house for months. I knew I needed to do a resume, but I didn't want to, so I chose just not. I never went back to work. I it took me a long time to accept the fact that I no longer was defined by the uniform. I was no longer Major Whittenberger. I no longer had to show up for formations. I no longer had my people. And that was really hard because there's days still, it's almost been 6 years where I miss it. I miss it so much. And I would do anything to go back. But because of my uh, mental, because of my disabilities, I guess if you want to put it, I don't think they would take me back. And I have family and all that, but still, I miss it so hard. And it was very difficult for me. Some of my peers were like, "Oh my gosh, you're so lucky. I wish I could retire." And I was not. I didn't feel like that at all. I was so mad. I was
Mm.
so mad. Like, how come I'm not good enough? That's how I thought. Why am I not good enough? How come my peer is good enough and I'm not? So it took me a long time to accept that.
Well, and acceptance is part of it. But, again, we talk about, the fallout from traumatic events, and it never seems like there's any one cause. It always seems like they're stacked, like, trauma after trauma after trauma, and we stack them, and, it's real, and you're living it, every day. And it just plays on your mind. And then you have to have purpose, as a human being, we have to. And so it's funny that your purpose becomes this accidental entrepreneur. So how does purpose become accidental, right? I'm thinking this, but so tell us. Well, thank you for your service. So cliche, right? But tell us about the accidental purpose that you are now embarking on, because I'm excited to learn how you made that transition.
I started writing and started speaking to some people behind the scenes to figure out how I was going to mentally get through this to me, it's somewhat of a traumatic experience from retirement. I didn't know how to figure my life out. From writing, I created the blog, the website, and decided to share it with the world. From then on, I knew I wanted to do something more, but I had so many people tell me, "You'll never be able to monetize that. It's just a blog. Why are you different from everybody else?" And so after so many years of thinking, well, yeah, I guess I am just a blog, I'm never going to amount to anything, I decided to and apply for the Rosie Network. If anybody knows about that, the Rosie Network, created by Stephanie Brown. I did their cohort in Virginia for about 6 months, and I realized that I was more than that. The ladies, the women in that cohort made me realize I was more than just a blog. So I continued to prove to myself and prove other people wrong that I could do more with this. And so that's how it ended. I never thought I would be an entrepreneur, but it was so by accident, because I wanted to prove to people that I can make a difference. And so that's how I created the podcast, a mentorship program, a book. I just kept moving forward because it was part of my self-healing journey. And I needed to be able to share with people that you can do it, and so that's how I did it. It was almost like people were telling me no. And I was like, screw that. I'm going to do it somehow. And so I just kept going.
That's a thanks for sharing that, because you know what, you bring another example of, here you are, deep down inside that you want to make a difference in the world, right? Another understatement. And isn't it amazing how when you want to change the world, your heart's bigger than the universe, and your persistence at wanting to make a real difference is inside you. But most people we run into, they don't have dreams like that. A lot of times they're not flying at 50,000 feet. They're at sea level, and that's okay. We all have a prerogative We all make choices. So I'm going to pull another word out here called persistence. And that's a perfect example of, first, not taking no for an answer, but a perfect example of persistent leadership. You knew what your core values were and are. You know who you are and what you want to accomplish on your journey. It's your life. And look at what you've been able to do with it. How did you pick the name Wild Ride of Life?
So
I know how. I know now why, but
I was really praying to God for some purpose in my life. I was really in a dark place, and I knew I needed to do something. And I don't know. I want to say I don't know where it came from, but I believe He sent it to me, because that was it. I knew. I said, you know what? I'm keeping it. I don't care if it doesn't make sense. It makes sense to me, and it's gonna work. So it really did. It just came in my sleep one day. I said, that's it. I'm going with it.
I love that. Hey, I'm Annette Whittenberger. I accidentally found my purpose, and let me tell you how I did it. It's like, that's a good story. That's a really good story. And, out of that pain and that dark place and that isolation, all created by you, but the keys to get out of that were also created by you. So leadership is also persistence and creation. Tell us about the book.
I knew I wanted to write a book. I just, how we get on our minds, and imposter syndrome comes in, and you want so many things to happen, but you don't know how to do it. I took a writing course, a short writing course, and she really made me believe I could do it. And I continued on. I continued to just keep writing after the course. And a friend of mine, Chris McPhee, I don't remember if you know him or not, he said, hey, one of my old buddies owns a publishing company called Tactical 16. And I was like, really? He says, just apply for it. Just try to apply and see, send in a proposal, see what you can do. And I did. I worked really, really hard to do this proposal, thinking, I don't know if it's going to, why me? But then, people say, well, why not you? So I went for it, and I waited 30 grueling days to get an answer back. And I got accepted. And I was like, holy shit, this is it. This is my time. And I went for it. I just continued writing, and I wanted to, it was really hard because you have to dig deep into your past. And so I went as far as reaching out to the courthouse where the I can't think of the word, where I had to go to testify against my
deposition.
Yeah, the deposition of against the abuser. I hadn't seen those records for 40 years, 35 plus years, and they still had it. They still had it, and I had them mailed to me, and I haven't read all of them yet, but I read the police report, and so I had to really dig in my past, because I wanted to make sure I was making accurate accounts and not just from my mind of what had happened. And so little things like that, I reached out to my family, said, hey, I'm going to talk about this in my life. You're involved because he's our dad. And they said, okay, it's okay. And so I had to, I wanted to do it in a respectful way, not just make this all about me, but my family's involved too. Can I use your name? They gave me permission to use your name. I didn't name everybody, and I didn't add everything in there, because I still have to be respectful to parts of my family. So I just wanted to provide hope for those that have been through divorce and childhood trauma and all these things. I wanted people to say, to read it and think, okay, she went through crap, but she made it out, and this is how she did it. And that's, I wanted to do more than post on social media. I wanted to put it out there and put it in someone's hands so that they can have it with them and think, okay, I could do it.
That's awesome. The title of Annette's book is The Wall Between Two Lives. It's available on Amazon and Tactical 16 and other places. Your journey has been an inspiration to so many, and I know what drives you. I have a funny feeling that very similar to what drives myself. And we never really know who we affect and how we affect them. But you're an exemplary example of what I call the give back leader. It's another part of leadership that's often overlooked. It's leadership is more than sometimes, taking care of the baby or, barking out an order. It's also volunteering, which you do quite a bit of. Can you tell us why you volunteer, and can you tell us one example or an event or a situation that happened that just made you feel really awesome about being a volunteer?
Gosh, it's funny because in the military, you are a mentor, right, to your soldiers. But when I left, I didn't feel like I had anything to mentor on anymore. I really didn't. And I just felt so worthless, useless, really. And so I thought, well, who am I going to mentor? Who's going to listen to me? And then one day I signed up for Veterani. And I actually had people, military spouses, reach out to me and said, I read your profile. You talk about mental health. How do you do that and become who you are? And that right there was like, this is it. I love this because I was vulnerable in my profile. I listed out what I was going through, but then what I do as well to provide some kind of inspiration. So that's when I knew that I have purpose, and people they still believe in me, even though I have been very upfront with what I live with. And I continued on. I became, I signed up for eMentor, then with the NASDAQ. And when I'm asked to be a guest speaker for a graduating class or whatever, that completely blows my mind. I am so humbled because 6 years ago, I didn't think I could give back. And now I'm being asked to speak, to provide inspiration to other people. And that just really, I'm getting emotional. That really just.
Well, when we get emotional, we know that your heart is in it. And that is a quality that more leaders need to have, is their heart into what they do, that they don't forfeit their leadership position by something that is selfish. And you're anything but selfish. I mean, you've been unselfish since a very early age. And so I give you great kudos for that, ma'am. Yeah, so that's really cool. I know, I alluded at the outset that you're working on a big project. Sounds super exciting, because music is the universal language. Can you share anything with us about that?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So I've loved music since I got my first what we call it, a boom box. And when I was gifted, I had a red one, and I used to put it in the backyard and listen to my tapes and the radio. And then I was gifted a dual cassette record player stereo system, and I just knew. And so backstory from that, I took voice lessons and piano lessons as a kid, but then I just didn't go through with it as I got older, unfortunately. So I was given an opportunity. The veterans, through the VA, they offer what's called a VRAP program, VRRAP, Veterans Rapid Readiness. I don't remember exactly. I applied for it and I got accepted. And what they do for you is they give you up to 12 months of free education off of their approved school list. I glanced at 80 pages of schools, and nothing really stuck out to me until I saw music. And I thought, oh my gosh, I really need to do this. I called the school, and through the program, I have been accepted to, I had to apply for the school, but let me tell you about that really quick. So it wasn't like easy in. I had to submit 2 original pieces of music. So I had to write 2 songs, and I had 2 of my friends, because I wasn't ready to sing it yet. They both sang it and played the guitar. So I've created 2 pieces of music, and I got accepted into the school. So what I'm going to do with this is I want to use it towards music therapy. And excuse me. I am going to do songwriting and music production. And so I want to use this for music therapy, for mental health, and that is my goal. So all this long story to show you that I worked hard for this. I'm so excited that I can't wait to do this.
Well, that's your next promotion, forget light bird, right? It's time for something bigger. Okay. And I'm thrilled to death for you. Do you have a name for it yet? Or are you still working on that?
I'm still working on it.
Okay. Well, cool. I know you'll come up with something really cool. Do you have just to recap real quick, we're talking with Army veteran and serial accidental entrepreneur, Anette Whittenberger. She's got an amazing story. Her leadership story is all about resiliency, independence, eternal optimism, dedication, innovation, creativity, give back. And she also mentioned choices. Do you have a personal mantra, Annette, that you adhere to every day in your own words? Do you have something, or maybe the words of somebody famous? I don't know, but you're pretty famous.
I heard this saying about 3 years ago now, your mess is your message. And I play that in my head every day. And I always talk about it, how your mess is your message. You could create something so great from what you've been through.
Your mess is your message. There you have it. So how can people find out more information? Where do they need to go in that? How can they find out about you, about your book, about the blog and the podcast? How can they find out more?
They can go to my website at a wild ride called life.com.
And then everything's there. They can find it there.
Yes, sir. You can.
Awesome. Well, I'm thrilled to death. I really want to thank you I'm glad we finally linked up again. It's been a couple of years and time flies when you're having fun, but I'm completely inspired and motivated now after talking to you over the past hour to do something and to give back myself. So there you have it. Annette, thank you very much. God bless you. Hang on after we shut this down, but have a few things to talk about. But thank you very much for being on this pilot series of interviews.
I appreciate it. It really was an honor for you to ask me. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening to another episode of Well. Without you, we don't exist. We hope the men who joined us today learned some valuable tips to improve and not be ashamed to use them. Be the change, set the example, keep going, men. And for the women leaders out there, keep creating and keep helping us men to become even better men, more effective leaders. Thank you. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and lead.